The boardroom was a sprawling, glass-walled sanctuary perched high above the city skyline. Sunlight poured through the windows, reflecting off the polished table where power players of the corporate world gathered. At the head of the table sat Victor Steele, the CEO of Steel Industries, a man who wore his authority like an expensive suit, perfectly tailored and intimidating. His sharp gaze scanned the room, daring anyone to challenge him. Mia Daniel sat near the middle of the table, clutching her notebook with steady hands. She had worked tirelessly on her proposal, staying up late to perfect every detail, knowing it could redefine the company's future. Today was her moment, but it wasn't lost on her that she was stepping into a lion's den. Victor leaned back in his chair, his piercing eyes settling on Mia. "All right, Daniels. Let's hear this groundbreaking idea you've been hyping up," he said, his voice tinged with condescension. Mia rose to her feet, her tailored navy suit a sharp contrast to the sea of gray and black in the room. Despite her nerves, she spoke with conviction. "Thank you, Mr. Steele. My proposal is focused on sustainability, an approach that not only aligns with emerging market demands, but also positions Steel Industries as a leader in innovation. By integrating green technologies and partnerships with ethical suppliers, we can—" Victor cut her off with a raised hand, smirking. "Let me stop you right there. Green technologies? Ethical suppliers?" He chuckled, the sound echoing through the silent room. "Do you have any idea how much that would cost us? This isn't some non-profit charity, Daniels. It's a business." A ripple of unease moved through the room. Several board members avoided eye contact, shifting uncomfortably in their seats. Mia held her ground, her gaze steady on Victor. "I understand your concern, Mr. Steele, but I've included a detailed financial analysis that shows how this strategy would actually increase profits in the long term." Victor waved her off dismissively. "Spare me the lecture, Daniels. I've been running this company for 20 years. I know what works and what doesn't. This idea? It's a pipe dream." The air grew heavy with tension. Mia could feel the weight of judgment pressing down on her, but she refused to back down. "With all due respect, Mr. Steele, the market is changing. Consumers are demanding more accountability from companies like ours. If we don't adapt now, we'll be left behind." Victor's smile faded, replaced by a cold glare. "And with all due respect to you, Daniels, you don't have the experience to make those kinds of calls. Stick to what you're good at and leave the big decisions to the people who know better." The words stung, but Mia refused to let them show on her face. She glanced around the room, searching for even a glimmer of support, but everyone else seemed frozen in place. The board members, mostly older white men, avoided her gaze. No one was willing to stand up to Victor. "Not here. Not now." Victor leaned forward, his voice dripping with mockery. "You've got ambition. I'll give you that. But ambition without wisdom? It's a liability. You can sit down now, Daniels." For a moment, the room was silent. All eyes were on Mia, waiting to see how she would respond. She took a deep breath, steadying herself. This was the moment she had anticipated, the moment she knew would come. "Thank you for your feedback, Mr. Steele," Mia said, her voice calm and measured. "But before I sit down, there's something I'd like to share with the board." Victor raised an eyebrow, clearly amused. "Oh, do enlighten us." Mia reached in her notebook and pulled out a neatly folded piece of paper. She unfolded it with deliberate care, her movements slow and purposeful. "As of last month, I inherited a 51% stake in Steel Industries from Mr. James Bradford, your late co-founder." The words hung in the air like a thunderclap. Victor's smirk vanished, replaced by a look of disbelief. Gasps rippled through the room, followed by murmurs of confusion and shock. "What?" Victor's voice was low, almost a growl. "That's impossible." Mia met his gaze, her own steady and unflinching. "It's not only possible, it's a fact. Mr. Bradford entrusted me with his shares because he believed in my vision for this company. He wanted Steel Industries to thrive in a world that's changing rapidly. And that starts today." The boardroom was eerily silent. Victor's face was a mixture of rage and disbelief, his grip tightening on the edge of the table. For the first time, the man who prided himself on control looked like he was losing his footing. Mia looked around the room, addressing the stunned board members. "I want to work with all of you to ensure Steel Industries continues to succeed. But that success depends on innovation, adaptability, and respect for every voice at this table." She sat down, her calm demeanor unshaken. The silence was deafening, the weight of her words sinking in. Victor remained frozen, his jaw clenched, as the realization of what had just transpired began to settle in. The power dynamics had shifted, and everyone in the room knew it. The silence in the boardroom was suffocating, punctuated only by the hum of the city below. Victor Steele's steely confidence, a hallmark of his presence, now faltered under the weight of Mia's words. His hands gripped the armrests of his chair, so tightly his knuckles turned white. For years, Victor had ruled this company with an iron fist, his authority unquestioned. And now, this young, confident black woman had upended everything with a single revelation. Victor leaned forward, his face a mask of disbelief. "What did you just say?" His voice was low, deliberate, as if he needed to hear it again to believe it. Mia didn't flinch. "As of last month, I inherited a 51% majority stake in Steel Industries," she repeated, her tone steady but firm. She slid the neatly folded document across the table. "Here's the paperwork confirming my ownership." One of the board members, an older man with silver hair and an impeccable suit, hesitated before picking up the document. His eyes darted across the page, his expression shifting from skepticism to shock. This is legitimate," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. Murmurs broke out among the other board members, their eyes flicking between Mia and Victor. Victor snatched the document from the man's hands, his eyes scanning the page. His face darkened with each passing second. "This is absurd," he barked. "James Bradford would never do this. He was my partner for over 2 decades. Why would he give you, a junior employee, control of his shares?" Mia sat back, her calm demeanor a stark contrast to Victor's growing agitation. "Mr. Bradford believed in me," she said, her voice unwavering. "He saw potential in the ideas I brought to this company, even when others didn't. He wanted Steel Industries to evolve, to adapt to the future, and he trusted me to help make that happen." Victor slammed the document onto the table, his anger barely contained. "You expect me to believe that my James, would hand over his shares to someone with no executive experience? This is a power grab, plain and simple." Mia met his gaze head on, her confidence unshaken. "It's not a power grab, Mr. Steele. It's a decision made by someone who cared deeply about this company and its future. He wanted Steel Industries to thrive, and he believed that required new leadership with vision, adaptability, and respect for every voice." The room was silent again, the tension palpable. The board members exchanged uneasy glances, clearly unsure of where their loyalties should lie. For years, they had followed Victor's lead, but now, for the first time, his dominance was being challenged. A younger board member, Samantha Hayes, cleared her throat, breaking the silence. "If this is true," she began cautiously, "then Ms. Daniels now holds the majority vote on this board. That means she has the final say on all major decisions." Victor shot her a glare so sharp it could have cut glass. "I built this company from the ground up," he snapped. "I've spent 20 years making Steel Industries what it is today. I'm not about to let some novice come in and undo everything I've worked for." Mia's eyes narrowed, her calm demeanor hardening just slightly. "With all due respect, Mr. Steele, no one is trying to undo your work. But times are changing, and this company needs to change with them. Clinging to outdated practices won't keep us competitive. It will destroy everything you've built." Victor opened his mouth to retort, but Samantha interjected. "She's right," she said, her voice gaining strength. "The market is shifting. Sustainability and ethical business practices aren't just trends, they're the future. We've been falling behind because we've refused to adapt." Victor's jaw tightened, his frustration growing. "So you're siding with her now?" he hissed. Samantha straightened in her chair. "I'm siding with what's best for the company." Mia glanced at Samantha, a flicker of gratitude passing over her face. "This isn't about taking sides," she said, addressing the room. This is about working together to ensure steel industries thrives. I want to collaborate with all of you to create a stronger, more forward-thinking company." Victor let out a bitter laugh. "Collaborate? Don't kid yourself, Daniels. This is a hostile takeover dressed up as teamwork. You have no idea what it takes to run a corporation like this." Mia tilted her head slightly, her gaze steady. "You're right about one thing, Mr. Steele. I'm not here to do things the way they've always been done. I'm here to bring a new perspective. And whether you like it or not, I now have the authority to make that happen." Victor's eyes burned with fury, but before he could respond, one of the older board members spoke up. "Perhaps we should adjourn this meeting," he suggested cautiously. "It's clear we need time to process this unexpected development." Victor looked like he wanted to argue, but he bit back his words. "Fine," he said through gritted teeth. "Let's adjourn. But this isn't over." Mia didn't say anything, but as she gathered her things and prepared to leave, her calm, measured movements spoke volumes. The balance of power had shifted, and she was ready to step into her new role. As the board members filed out, Victor remained seated, staring at the document in front of him. For the first time in years, he felt the one thing he thought he'd never experience in his own company: fear. Victor Steele sat alone in his corner office, the sprawling city skyline glowing faintly under the setting sun. The glass walls, which once symbolized his invincibility, now felt like they were closing in. The board meeting replayed in his mind like a relentless loop, each word from Mia cutting deeper than the last. For the first time in years, he felt something unfamiliar: vulnerability. Victor wasn't always the towering figure of authority he was today. Born into a working-class family in a small industrial town, he clawed his way out of obscurity through sheer determination. His father worked in a steel mill, often pulling double shifts to make ends meet, while his mother juggled odd jobs to keep food on the table. From a young age, Victor vowed he would never live a life of scarcity. He would become a man of means, power, and influence, no matter what it took. As a teenager, Victor showed an uncanny knack for leadership and negotiation. He started small, convincing local businesses to sponsor his high school debate team and later organizing community fundraisers that earned him recognition. By the time he graduated, he had already mapped out his future: college, corporate America, and eventually, the creation of his own empire. Victor's ambition led him to a top-tier business school, where he thrived. He wasn't the smartest in the room, but he was always the most driven. He learned early on that power wasn't about having all the answers. It was about making people believe you did. With his charisma and unrelenting work ethic, he quickly rose through the ranks of various companies, earning a reputation as a cutthroat dealmaker who would do whatever it took to win. But his real breakthrough came in his early 30s when he met James Bradford, a seasoned entrepreneur with a keen eye for innovation. James was everything Victor wasn't: calm, measured, and deeply empathetic. Together, they made an unlikely but formidable team. Victor brought the drive and daring, while James tempered his impulsiveness with wisdom and experience. It was James who suggested they name their company Steel Industries, a nod to Victor's surname and a symbol of resilience. The early days of Steel Industries were grueling but rewarding. Victor and James worked tirelessly, often sleeping in the office and living off vending machine snacks. Victor admired James's ability to connect with people, from investors to janitors, treating everyone with respect. At the time, Victor saw it as a weakness: too much kindness in a world that thrived on ruthlessness. He believed results mattered more than relationships, and his sharp, no-nonsense approach began to overshadow James's gentler methods as the company grew. Over the years, Steel Industries transformed into a corporate giant. With success came wealth, influence, and a sense of invincibility. Victor reveled in it, distancing himself from the struggles of his past. He built a reputation as a fearless leader, but beneath the surface, cracks began to form in his partnership with James. James often voiced concerns about the company's direction, urging Victor to consider more sustainable and ethical practices. "We have a responsibility, Victor," James would say. "It's not just about profits. It's about the legacy we leave behind." Victor dismissed these ideas as idealistic nonsense. "Legacy doesn't pay the bills, James. Results do," he would retort. Over time, their disagreements deepened, creating an unspoken rift. Victor saw James as overly sentimental, while James grew weary of Victor's relentless pursuit of power at any cost. Despite their differences, Victor never imagined Steel Industries without James. So when James passed away suddenly 3 months ago, it hit Victor harder than he expected. He hadn't just lost a business partner. He'd lost the one person who truly balanced him. Yet even in grief, Victor focused on maintaining control. He assumed the company was his now, free from James's soft influence. The revelation that James had entrusted his shares to Mia Daniels felt like a betrayal. Victor had tolerated Mia's presence in the company because James believed in her, but he had always seen her as just another ambitious employee, not someone capable of challenging him. The thought of James bypassing him to leave the majority stake to her stung more than he cared to admit. Victor stood from his desk, pacing the room as memories of James flooded his mind. He could still hear James's voice, calm but resolute. "Victor, leadership isn't about power. It's about purpose. One day, you'll understand that." "Purpose," Victor muttered under his breath, his tone dripping with sarcasm. He poured himself a drink, the amber liquid catching the fading sunlight. Purpose hadn't built Steel Industries, he had. Purpose hadn't closed billion-dollar deals or expanded their reach globally. That had been his doing. But as Victor stared into his glass, he couldn't shake the image of Mia standing tall in the boardroom, her confidence unyielding. She had disrupted the order he had spent decades building. And worse, she had the audacity to speak with a clarity and purpose he couldn't ignore. Victor's mind raced with questions. Had James truly believed Mia could lead the company? Or was this some parting message, a final attempt to teach Victor a lesson he hadn't been willing to learn? Whatever the answer, one thing was certain. Victor wasn't about to let Steel Industries slip through his fingers. Not now. Not ever. He set the glass down with a decisive clink. If Mia wanted to play this game, she'd better be ready. Victor Steele didn't lose, not to anyone, and certainly not to someone he still considered beneath him. Mia Daniels sat at her modest kitchen table that evening, the glow of her laptop illuminating her tired but determined face. The events of the day replayed in her mind. The boardroom tension, Victor's scornful remarks, and the stunned silence that followed her revelation. It felt like a victory, but it was only the first step in what she knew would be a long and difficult battle. Mia had never taken the easy road. Raised in a working-class neighborhood by a single mother, she learned the value of perseverance early on. Her mother, Janice, worked multiple jobs to keep food on the table and provide for Mia and her younger brother, Marcus. It was from her mother that Mia inherited her resilience and belief in the power of hard work. Growing up, Mia excelled academically, often earning scholarships that helped her attend prestigious schools where she was one of the few black students. The experience was isolating at times, but it taught her how to navigate spaces where she wasn't always welcome. She had to fight harder, speak louder, and prove herself over and over again. It wasn't fair, but she never let it break her. Her drive eventually led her to a top-tier university, where she majored in business and minored in environmental studies, an unconventional pairing that reflected her dual passions for innovation and sustainability. While many of her peers chased careers in high finance, Mia dreamed of creating change within the corporate world, bringing ethics and accountability to an industry that often prioritized profit over people. Her big break came when she landed an internship at Steel Industries, a company that had caught her attention for its early promises of innovation. The internship was grueling, filled with long hours and demanding projects, but Mia thrived. She quickly caught the eye of James Bradford, one of the company's co-founders, who became both her mentor and her greatest advocate. James was unlike anyone Mia had ever worked with. Where others saw her as just another ambitious intern, James saw potential. He would invite her to strategy meetings, asking for her input even when others dismissed her as too inexperienced. "Your perspective matters, Mia," he'd often tell her. "Don't ever let anyone make you think otherwise." Under James's mentorship, Mia rose through the ranks, earning respect from some, but resentment from others who couldn't understand how a young black woman was climbing the corporate ladder so quickly. She often found herself the target of microaggressions and subtle slights, but she had learned to pick her battles carefully. Her goal was clear: to prove her worth through her work, no matter how long it took. It was during this time that Mia began to develop her vision for the future of steel industries. She saw the potential for the company to lead in sustainability and social responsibility, setting an example for others in the industry. But whenever she brought up these ideas in meetings, Victor Steele would wave her off dismissively. "We're here to make money, not save the planet," he'd say, his tone dripping with derision. Despite the resistance, Mia remained focused. She continued to refine her ideas, working on proposals during late nights and weekends. James encouraged her, often telling her, "The world needs more leaders like you, Mia. Don't let small minds dim your light." When James fell ill, it was a devastating blow to Mia. He had been more than a mentor. He had been a champion for her dreams and a source of unwavering support. She visited him often in the hospital, sharing updates on her projects and seeking his advice. Even in his weakened state, James remained sharp, offering wisdom that would guide her long after he was gone. Before his death, James confided in Mia about his decision to leave her his shares in the company. "You're the future of steel industries," he told her one afternoon, his voice frail but resolute. "Victor doesn't see it yet, but you'll show him. I know you will." The weight of his trust was overwhelming, but Mia promised herself she wouldn't let him down. She knew stepping into a position of power would make her a target, especially under someone like Victor. But she also knew that her voice, her ideas, and her perspective were desperately needed in a company that had lost its way. Reflecting on her journey, Mia felt a renewed sense of purpose. She wasn't just fighting for herself. She was fighting for everyone who had ever been underestimated, overlooked, or silenced. She was fighting for the people steel industries impacted through its practices, for the employees who deserved better, and for the legacy James had entrusted to her. The road ahead wouldn't be easy. Victor was a formidable adversary, and she knew he wouldn't relinquish control without a fight. But Mia had faced challenges before, and she had always emerged stronger. She wasn't just stepping into a leadership role, she was stepping into her destiny. As she closed her laptop and prepared for another long day, Mia whispered to herself, "This is just the beginning." Her determination was unshakable, and for the first time in her career, she felt truly ready to take on whatever came next. The atmosphere at Steel Industries had shifted dramatically since Mia's revelation in the boardroom. For some, it was a breath of fresh air, a chance for long, overdue changes. For others, it was an unwelcome disruption, a threat to the comfortable status quo. Mia knew she couldn't navigate this new chapter alone. If she was going to succeed, she needed to identify her allies and be wary of her enemies. In the days following the meeting, the division among employees became apparent. Victor's loyalists, many of whom had been with him for years, viewed Mia's rise with skepticism or outright hostility. To them, she was an outsider, someone who had disrupted the natural order of the company. Whispers circulated in hallways, speculative and often unkind. "Who does she think she is?" one senior manager muttered to a colleague. "She's just a diversity hire, riding on James Bradford's coattails." Mia, however, was no stranger to being underestimated. She had faced similar resistance before and learned to navigate it with a mix of grace and strategy. Instead of engaging with the negativity, she focused on building connections with those who believed in her vision, or at least were open to hearing her out. One of her first allies came from an unexpected corner of the company. Samantha Hayes, a younger board member who had stayed silent during the meeting but reached out to Mia afterward. Samantha was sharp and ambitious, but unlike many of her peers, she wasn't wedded to Victor's way of doing things. "I think you're onto something," Samantha said during their first private conversation. "This company has been stuck in the past for too long. If you're serious about your vision, I want to help." Samantha's support was a turning point. With her insider knowledge and ability to navigate boardroom politics, she became a valuable partner in Mia's efforts to introduce new initiatives. Together, They strategized how to present proposals in ways that appeal to the more pragmatic members of the board. Start small, Samantha advised. Prove that your ideas work, and the skeptics will have no choice but to follow. Meanwhile, within the broader company, Mia began to find quiet allies among the employees. Many had grown frustrated with the rigid, profit-first culture that had dominated under Victor's leadership. A group of mid-level managers, led by a resourceful operations director named Priya Patel, approached Mia with ideas for improving workplace morale and productivity. "We've been sitting on these for years," Priya explained. But under Victor, no one wanted to take the risk of speaking up. Mia listened attentively, making it clear that she valued their input. "This is exactly the kind of thinking we need," she told Priya. "Let's work together to bring these ideas to life." As Mia's network of allies grew, so did the resistance from Victor's camp. Chief among her adversaries was Michael Porter, the company's CFO and one of Victor's most trusted confidants. Michael had built his career alongside Victor, and he viewed Mia's presence as a direct threat to their legacy. In meetings, he was quick to challenge her proposals, often resorting to thinly veiled condescension. "That's an interesting idea, Ms. Daniels," he would say with a patronizing smile. "But have you considered the financial risks? We can't afford to jeopardize our shareholders' trust with untested experiments." Victor, of course, remained Mia's most formidable opponent. While outwardly composed, he was working behind the scenes to undermine her. He held private meetings with loyal board members, subtly casting doubt on Mia's qualifications and intentions. "She's ambitious," he'd say, his tone dripping with feigned concern. "But ambition without experience is dangerous. We need to tread carefully." Despite the pushback, Mia stayed focused. She began hosting informal gatherings with employees across departments, creating spaces where they could share their concerns and ideas without fear of retribution. These sessions revealed just how disconnected Victor's leadership had been from the realities of the workforce. "I've worked here for 10 years, one employee confided, "and this is the first time I felt like my voice actually matters." But not all feedback was supportive. At one gathering, a senior engineer voiced doubts about Mia's ability to lead. "This company has been successful because of Victor's vision," he said bluntly. "Why should we trust you to do better?" Mia didn't shy away from the question. "Because I'm not here to dismantle what works," she replied. "I'm here to build on it, to make steel industries stronger and more resilient. That starts with listening. To all of you." The engineer didn't respond immediately, but his expression softened. It was a small moment, but one that reminded Mia of the importance of perseverance and empathy. Victor, meanwhile, began ramping up his resistance. He quietly instructed Michael to audit Mia's recent projects, looking for any misstep they could exploit. He also started planting seeds of doubt among employees, suggesting that Mia's changes would lead to layoffs or financial instability. "Mark my words," he told a group of senior managers, "this experiment will blow up in her face." Mia was aware of Victor's tactics, but chose not to confront him directly, at least not yet. Instead, she focused on strengthening her alliances, ensuring that her growing base of supporters was prepared to counter any sabotage. With each passing day, the lines between allies and enemies became clearer, and the stakes continued to rise. As she left the office late one evening, Mia reflected on the challenges ahead. The battle for steel industries was far from over, but she was no longer alone. For the first time, she felt a glimmer of hope, not just for herself, but for everyone who believed in the company's potential to be something greater. The tension within steel industries reached a boiling point as the clash between Victor Steel and Mia Daniels escalated into an all-out power struggle. What began as a battle of ideologies, profit-driven leadership versus innovation and inclusivity, quickly turned personal. Each interaction between the two became a calculated move in a high-stakes game of corporate chess, and the entire company watched with bated breath to see who would emerge victorious. Victor, despite his outward confidence, was seething. For years, he had reigned unchallenged, his word treated as law. But now, Mia's calm defiance and growing influence among the board and employees were shaking the foundation of his control. Determined to regain his dominance, Victor called for an emergency board meeting, ostensibly to discuss critical company issues. In reality, it was a ploy to undermine Mia and her proposals before they could gain further traction. The boardroom was tense as the members gathered. Victor sat at the head of the table, his posture commanding as he opened the meeting. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his voice smooth but carrying an edge of authority. "I've called this session because I believe we need to address the direction this company is heading. Recent changes, while well-intentioned, have raised concerns about their long-term viability." Mia, seated across from him, met his gaze evenly. She knew this was coming and had spent the previous night preparing for every possible line of attack. "With respect, Mr. Steele," she interjected, "could you clarify what specific concerns you're referring to? Transparency is key if we're going to address any issues effectively." Victor's eyes narrowed, but he maintained his composure. "Of course, let's start with the proposed shift towards sustainability initiatives. While these ideas sound admirable, the financial risks are significant. The upfront costs could alienate shareholders, jeopardize our profitability, and put the company in a precarious position." Several board members murmured in agreement, but Mia refused to be intimidated. "I appreciate your perspective," she replied, her tone measured. "However, I've already provided a detailed financial analysis that demonstrates how these initiatives will drive long-term growth. The market is evolving, and companies that fail to adapt risk being left behind. We've seen this happen to others, and I'm determined not to let it happen to us." Victor leaned forward, his voice growing sharper. "And what if you're wrong? What if these so-called innovations backfire and cost us millions? Are you prepared to take responsibility for that?" Mia didn't flinch. Leadership is about taking calculated risks for the greater good of the company. What's far riskier is clinging to outdated strategies that no longer serve us. Our competitors are already moving in this direction. If we wait, we'll be playing catch-up. The room grew silent as the board members processed her words. Samantha Hayes, one of Mia's allies, chose this moment to speak. "Mia raises a valid point," she said, her voice firm. "The data supports her proposals, and we can't ignore the shifting demands of our consumers. If we don't evolve, we risk stagnation." Victor's jaw tightened as he realized the conversation was slipping out of his control. "I'm not opposed to innovation," he said, forcing a smile. "But I believe these changes need to be implemented more cautiously. We can't afford to act on idealism alone." Mia seized the opening. "I agree we need to be thoughtful in our approach, but caution shouldn't paralyze us. This isn't about idealism, it's about staying competitive. And with all due respect, Mr. Steele, leadership isn't just about protecting what we've built. It's about envisioning what we can become." Victor's composure cracked for a brief moment, his frustration evident. The dynamic in the room had shifted, and even some of his loyalists seemed to be reconsidering their stance. He quickly regrouped, turning to Michael Porter, the CFO and his closest ally. "Michael, perhaps you can shed light on the financial implications of these proposals." Michael nodded, flipping through a stack of papers. "From a financial perspective, the initial investment required for these changes is significant. It's a gamble, one that could pay off, but only if everything goes perfectly. If it doesn't, we're looking at potential losses that could damage our reputation with investors." Mia listened carefully, then responded with precision. "Thank you for that insight, Michael. However, the risk of doing nothing is far greater. Consumer trends, government regulations, and even our competitors are all moving in a direction that rewards innovation and penalizes stagnation. I've included contingency plans in my proposal to mitigate these risks, and I'm confident we can implement them successfully." As the discussion continued, it became clear that the board was split. Some members, like Samantha, were firmly in Mia's camp, while others remained loyal to Victor. The undecided members were the key, and Mia knew this was her moment to win them over. "I understand change is uncomfortable," Mia said, addressing the entire room. "But the most successful companies in history are the ones that embrace change and led the way. Steel Industries has the potential to be a leader, not a follower. That's what James Bradford believed, and it's what I believe too." Victor's expression darkened at the mention of James, but he said nothing. The board members exchanged glances, their silence speaking volumes. For the first time, Victor's dominance in the room felt uncertain. The meeting ended without a definitive conclusion, but Mia left with a sense of momentum. She had held her ground, articulated her vision, and planted seeds of doubt in Victor's allies. The power struggle was far from over, but for the first time it felt like she was gaining the upper hand. As she returned to her office, Mia allowed herself a small, triumphant smile. The battle was far from won, but today, she had taken a significant step forward. The tides were shifting, and she was ready for whatever came next. Mia Daniels stood at the front of the packed conference room, her hands resting on the sleek wooden podium. Behind her, a large screen displayed the words, "Steel Industries, a vision for tomorrow." Rows of employees, board members, and department heads watched her intently. This wasn't just another presentation. It was the unveiling of a bold new chapter for the company. And Mia knew the stakes couldn't be higher. The past few weeks had been a whirlwind of preparation. After the contentious board meeting, Mia understood she needed more than words to win over skeptics. She needed a tangible, compelling vision, something that could rally even the most reluctant employees. So she spent countless hours refining her proposals, gathering data, and consulting with allies like Samantha Hayes and Priya Patel. "Good morning, everyone," Mia began, her voice steady but warm. "Today, I want to talk about the future of steel industries. A future that's not just about surviving in a changing world, but thriving in it." She paused, letting her words sink in. For too long, we've relied on strategies that worked in the past, but no longer align with the world we live in today. Consumers are demanding more from the companies they support. More accountability, more innovation, and more responsibility. We can either rise to meet those demands or risk being left behind. Mia clicked a button on the podium, and the screen behind her shifted to display a graph. This is the trajectory of companies that have embraced sustainability and ethical business practices, she explained, pointing to the upward trend. In this, the graph shifted to a flat line. Is what happens when companies resist change. Victor Steele sat in the audience, his expression unreadable, but his posture tense. He hadn't said much since the last board meeting, but his presence was palpable, a reminder that the power struggle was far from over. Mia glanced at him briefly, then focused her attention back on the room. "My vision for steel industries is built on 3 pillars," she continued. "Innovation, sustainability, and inclusivity. Let me break down what that means for us." The screen changed again, this time showing a sleek, animated blueprint of a manufacturing plant. "First, innovation," Mia said. "We're known for our cutting-edge products, but we've fallen behind in how we create them. By adopting green manufacturing technologies, we can reduce costs over time, lower our environmental impact, and attract a new generation of customers who care deeply about these issues." She clicked to the next slide, which displayed a series of logos from successful companies that had adopted similar strategies. This isn't theory. These are real-world examples of companies that have embraced change and seen exponential growth as a result. A murmur rippled through the room. Some employees nodded, intrigued, while others exchanged skeptical glances. Mia anticipated their concerns and was ready for them. "Now let's talk about sustainability," she said, her voice gaining momentum. "This isn't just about being environmentally friendly. It's about positioning ourselves as a leader in an industry that's rapidly evolving. Governments worldwide are introducing stricter regulations, and consumers are holding companies accountable. If we take the lead now, we'll not only avoid penalties, but also set ourselves apart as innovators." She clicked again, revealing a cost-benefit analysis that highlighted the long-term profitability of adopting these measures. "I know some of you are worried about the financial risks," she said, addressing the room directly. "But as you can see here, the initial investment is outweighed by the long-term gains. It's not just the right thing to do, it's the smart thing to do." Victor shifted in his seat, his expression still guarded. Mia could feel his eyes on her, but she refused to let his presence rattle her. She moved to the final pillar of her presentation. "And finally, inclusivity," she said, her tone softening but carrying weight. "Steel Industries has always prided itself on being a place where talent can thrive. But we can do better. By fostering a culture that values diverse perspectives, we unlock the full potential of our workforce. Diversity isn't just a buzzword, It's a business strategy. The screen displayed a series of statistics showing how companies with diverse leadership performed better financially and had higher employee satisfaction rates. When people feel seen, valued, and heard, they work harder, think more creatively, and stay loyal to the company. Inclusivity isn't just good for morale, it's good for the bottom line. Mia took a step back from the podium, letting the room absorb her words. "This is my vision," she concluded. "A company that leads with innovation, grows with sustainability, and thrives on inclusivity. Steel Industries has the potential to set a new standard in our industry, but only if we're willing to take the leap together." The room was silent for a moment, the weight of her words hanging in the air. Then, a voice broke through the stillness. "That's ambitious," said Michael Porter, the CFO, his tone neutral but laced with skepticism. "But ambition doesn't always translate to results. How do you plan to ensure these changes don't destabilize the company?" Mia smiled, prepared for the question. "Great question, Michael," she replied. "That's why I've developed a phased implementation plan. We'll start small with pilot programs to test and refine these initiatives. Once we have measurable success, we'll scale up. This isn't about making reckless decisions. It's about smart, strategic growth." A few heads nodded in approval. Even some of Victor's staunchest allies seemed intrigued by her methodical approach. Mia turned her attention to the employees in the room, her voice softening. "I know change is hard, but I also know that the people in this room are capable of incredible things. Together, we can build a future we're all proud of." As she finished, a ripple of applause began to spread. It wasn't unanimous, but it was enough to signal a shift. Mia had planted the seeds of her vision, and though the path ahead was uncertain, she felt a glimmer of hope. Victor, however, remained silent, his expression unreadable. Mia knew he wouldn't go down without a fight, but for the first time, she felt the tide beginning to turn in her favor. The vision was clear, and she was ready to lead Steel Industries into a new era, whether Victor liked it or not. Late one night, Mia Daniel sat alone in her office, the faint hum of the city outside breaking the silence. The presentation earlier that day had gone better than she'd hoped, but she knew it was only the beginning. Victor Steele's silence during her speech hadn't been a concession. It was a storm cloud brewing. Mia stared at her reflection in the darkened window, her thoughts racing with equal parts hope and doubt. The stakes felt heavier than ever. For Mia, this wasn't just a corporate battle. It was deeply personal. Every move she made was not only a reflection of her leadership, but also a statement about who she was and what she represented. As a Black woman in a position of power, she knew that every misstep, every failure, would be magnified and scrutinized in ways her predecessors had never faced. The pressure wasn't new, but it was unrelenting. She leaned back in her chair, her mind drifting to her family. Her mother, Janice, had always been her anchor, a woman of quiet strength who had sacrificed everything to ensure her children could dream beyond the boundaries life had tried to impose on them. Mia often thought about the nights her mother spent poring over bills at the kitchen table, exhaustion etched into her face. Yet, Janice never wavered in her encouragement. "You can do anything, Mia," her mother would say, often after a long shift at the hospital. "Never let anyone tell you different." Those words had carried Mia through countless challenges, from navigating the isolating halls of her prestigious university to enduring subtle but stinging dismissals in the corporate world. But now, in this pivotal moment, Mia wondered if she was truly prepared for the fight ahead. The enormity of what she was trying to achieve felt overwhelming at times. Her phone buzzed, breaking her train of thought. It was a message from her younger brother, Marcus, who lived several states away. "Saw your presentation clip online. Proud of you, sis. Keep pushing. You got this." A small smile tugged at Mia's lips. Marcus had always been her biggest cheerleader, and his belief in her was a reminder of why she couldn't afford to falter. But not everyone in her life was as supportive. Over the past few weeks, she'd lost touch with several friends who had once cheered her on, but now seemed distant. The sudden shift in power dynamics had made some uncomfortable, and a few had even subtly questioned her ability to handle her new role. "Are you sure you're ready for this?" one had asked during a recent dinner, the doubt in their voice unmistakable. Mia tried not to let it bother her, but the comment lingered in her mind. Was she ready? The voice of self-doubt crept in at night, whispering fears she worked hard to silence. She had the majority stake in the company, but Victor still held decades of influence, connections, and loyalty. She knew he was already working behind the scenes to discredit her and rally support for his agenda. Her position was far from secure. Meanwhile, Victor was facing his own personal struggles. The empire he had built over 2 decades was slipping from his grasp, and the loss was a bitter pill to swallow. For the first time, his word wasn't law, and every decision he made seemed to be scrutinized in a way that left him feeling vulnerable. At home, the cracks in his carefully curated image were beginning to show. Victor's wife, Claire, had noticed the change in him. "You've been distracted," she said one evening as they sat in their expansive living room. "This thing with Mia, it's consuming you." Victor scowled, swirling the glass of scotch in his hand. "It's not just about her. It's about the company, the one I built from nothing." Claire sighed, placing a hand on his arm. "You didn't build it alone, Victor. And maybe it's time to think about what's best for the company, not just your pride." Her words stung because they struck at the heart of Victor's conflict. He wasn't used to being challenged, especially not by someone like Mia. But deep down, he couldn't ignore the nagging feeling that some of her ideas made sense. That realization, however, was buried beneath layers of resentment and a fear of losing everything he had worked for. While Victor wrestled with his inner turmoil, Mia channeled hers into action. She spent late nights researching, consulting with allies like Samantha Hayes and Priya Patel, and preparing for every possible obstacle Victor might throw her way. But even as she worked, there were moments when doubt crept in. She feared that if she failed, it wouldn't just be her career on the line. It would reinforce every prejudice and bias she had spent her life fighting against. A knock on her office door startled her. It was Priya, holding 2 cups of coffee. "I figured you'd still be here," Priya said with a smile, handing Mia one of the cups. "You've been working nonstop. Don't forget to take care of yourself." Mia chuckled softly. "Thanks, Priya. I'll rest once we've won this thing." Priya sat down across from her, her expression turning serious. "You're not alone in this, Mia. A lot of us believe in what you're trying to do. And if Victor tries to pull anything, we'll stand with you." Mia felt a lump rise in her throat. She had always prided herself on her independence, but Priya's words reminded her that leadership wasn't about doing everything alone. It was about building a team, trusting others, and drawing strength from those who believe in the same vision. As the clock ticked toward midnight, Mia refocused her energy. She wasn't just fighting for a company. She was fighting for the future she wanted to create for herself, her family, and everyone who had ever been told they didn't belong. The stakes were personal, and that made her resolve unbreakable. "I won't let him win," Mia whispered to herself. Not this time. The first whispers of trouble began in hushed tones among Steel Industries employees. It started with an anonymous email sent to several department heads, claiming to have evidence of unethical financial practices within the company. The subject line read, "The real cost of leadership." While most dismissed it as spam, one recipient forwarded it to HR, and from there, the email quickly reached Mia's desk. Mia stared at the email, her brows furrowing as she read the accusations. It alleged that Victor Steele had been funneling company funds into a private account under the guise of operational expenses. The email included a cryptic message: "Dig into the offshore accounts if you want the truth." At first, Mia was skeptical. She knew Victor was ruthless and willing to bend rules, but outright embezzlement? That seemed too blatant, even for him. Still, the timing was suspicious. Victor had been escalating his campaign to undermine her, and this could be an attempt to distract or sabotage her leadership. But if the allegations were true, it could be the leverage she needed to finally secure her position. She forwarded the email to Samantha Hayes, her closest ally on the board, and Priya Patel, who had proven to be a reliable confidant. The 3 met in Mia's office that evening to discuss their next steps. "This could be a trap," Samantha warned, her sharp eyes scanning the email on Mia's laptop. "Victor's not stupid. If there's anything questionable in his accounts, he would have buried it deep." "Agreed," Priya added. "But what if it's real? We can't ignore this. If he's been misusing company funds, the board has a right to know. Mia leaned back in her chair, her mind racing. If we investigate this and it turns out to be false, it'll look like I'm launching a witch hunt. But if it's true, she trailed off, the weight of the possibility settling over her. After a moment of silence, Mia nodded. We proceed carefully. Priya, I need you to discreetly review our financial records. Look for anything unusual in the accounts. Samantha, can you tap into your legal contacts? We might need advice on how to handle this if it goes public. Both women agreed, and the investigation began. Over the next few days, Priya combed through years of financial data, while Samantha worked quietly with a trusted legal advisor to prepare for any fallout. Meanwhile, Mia maintained her outward composure, continuing her work as if nothing was amiss. Victor, oblivious to their investigation, carried on his campaign against her, holding private meetings with board members to sow doubt about her leadership. The breakthrough came a week later when Priya burst into Mia's office with a stack of documents. I found something, she said, her voice urgent. Look at this. She spread the papers across Mia's desk, pointing to a series of transactions labeled under a vague expense category. The amounts were significant, totaling millions over several years. These funds were transferred to a shell company registered offshore, Priya explained. It's listed as a vendor, but there's no record of them providing any services to steel industries. Mia felt her pulse quicken as she scanned the documents. Does this tie back to Victor directly? Priya hesitated. Not yet. The account is under a different name, but the timing of the transactions aligns with decisions Victor personally approved. It's circumstantial, but it's enough to raise serious questions. Samantha arrived soon after, her expression grim. I spoke to my contact. If we go public with this, we need to be absolutely sure. False accusations could destroy our credibility, but if it's true, Victor could face criminal charges. Mia's mind raced as she considered their options. This wasn't just about exposing Victor. It was about protecting the company. If the allegations were true and investors found out, it could lead to a public relations nightmare and a drop in stock value. But if she stayed silent and the truth emerged later, her silence would make her complicit. I'll confront him, Mia decided. If he's innocent, he'll have a chance to explain. If not, she didn't need to finish the sentence. The confrontation took place in Victor's office the next morning. He was sitting behind his massive desk, reviewing paperwork, when Mia walked in with a folder in hand. Her expression was calm, but her eyes betrayed a steely determination. Mia, Victor said without looking up. I assume this isn't a social visit. No, it's not, she replied, setting the folder on his desk. We need to talk about these transactions. Victor's eyes flicked to the folder, then back to her. What is this? Evidence, Mia said simply. Millions of dollars transferred to a shell company with no legitimate ties to steel industries. The board will want an explanation. Victor's jaw tightened, and for a moment he said nothing. Then he leaned back in his chair, a cold smile spreading across his face. You've been busy, he said, his tone laced with mock admiration. I didn't think you had it in you. Answer the question, Victor, Mia said, her voice firm. What is this money being used for? Victor stood, his demeanor shifting from smug to defensive. You have no idea what you're talking about. Those transactions were approved for operational contingencies, legitimate expenses that kept this company afloat during difficult times. Operational contingencies? Mia repeated, raising an eyebrow. Because from where I'm standing, it looks like embezzlement. Victor's face darkened. Careful, Mia. You're playing a dangerous game, and so are you, she shot back. If the board finds out about this, they won't just question your leadership. They'll remove you entirely. For the first time, Victor seemed genuinely shaken. You don't want to do this, he warned. If you bring this to the board, it'll destroy the company. No, Victor, Mia said, her voice calm but resolute. You'll destroy the company if this continues. I'm taking this to the board. Later that day, the evidence was presented to the board in a tense, closed-door meeting. As the members reviewed the documents, the room buzzed with anger and disbelief. Victor attempted to defend himself, but his arguments were weak and riddled with contradictions. By the end of the meeting, the decision was unanimous. Victor was suspended pending further investigation, and the board authorized a full audit of steel industry's finances. The scandal sent shockwaves through the company, and for the first time, Mia saw a clear path forward, a chance to rebuild the company's integrity and finally lead it into the future. Victor had fallen, but the fight wasn't over yet. Victor Steele sat in his sprawling office, the curtains drawn against the midday sun. The once bustling space, always filled with assistants, advisors, and the hum of activity, now felt eerily quiet. The board's decision to suspend him had been a crushing blow, not just to his career, but to his pride. For the first time in 2 decades, Victor felt powerless, a stranger in the empire he had built. The forensic audit was already underway, and the accusations against him were gaining traction. The evidence Mia had presented was damning, and although Victor maintained his innocence publicly, he knew the truth. The funds had been redirected. It had started small, an easy transfer here, a quiet approval there, all under the guise of strategic reserves. He had convinced himself it was for the good of the company, a buffer to weather any storm. But as the amounts grew larger and his motivations less clear, he had crossed a line even he wasn't willing to admit. Victor poured himself a drink, the amber liquid swirling in the glass as he stared at his reflection. How had it come to this? He had spent his life building steel industries from nothing, sacrificing relationships, health, and any semblance of balance to ensure its success. And now, a woman he had dismissed as inexperienced and naive had brought him to his knees. Yet, beneath his anger and resentment, a quiet voice nagged at him. Was she wrong? Victor thought back to the day James Bradford had first introduced Mia to the company. He remembered James's enthusiasm, the way he spoke about her potential. She's going to change this place, Victor, James had said, his tone hopeful. Victor had brushed it off at the time, seeing her as just another ambitious employee who would fade into the background. But James had been right. Mia had changed everything. Across the building, Mia Daniels was deep in strategy meetings with her growing team of allies. With Victor sidelined, she had assumed temporary control of steel industries, and the pressure to deliver was immense. The media was watching, investors were jittery, and employees were uncertain about the company's future. Mia worked tirelessly to stabilize operations. She implemented transparency measures, allowing employees and stakeholders to track progress on the company's financial recovery. She met with department heads, listening to their concerns and incorporating their insights into her plans. Slowly but surely, confidence in her leadership began to grow. But it wasn't just the external challenges that weighed on Mia. Late at night, when the building was empty and silence filled the halls, doubt crept in. Was she truly capable of rebuilding steel industries? Or was she simply riding the wave of Victor's downfall? The pressure of representing not only herself, but also the hopes of everyone who had ever been underestimated felt overwhelming at times. One evening, as she reviewed a report on the audit's progress, there was a knock at her door. She looked up to see Samantha Hayes standing there, holding 2 cups of coffee. "I figured you could use this," Samantha said with a smile, setting one of the cups on Mia's desk. "Thanks," Mia said, taking a grateful sip. "I didn't realize how exhausting all of this would be." "You're doing great," Samantha said, her tone reassuring. "The board's starting to see what James saw in you. Victor's loyalists are quiet for now, but they're watching. Keep proving them wrong." Mia nodded, her resolve hardening. "I will." Meanwhile, Victor faced a crossroads. His legal team advised him to step back and let the process play out, but his instincts told him to fight. He began drafting a statement to the board, one that acknowledged his missteps while framing them as decisions made in the company's best interest. Yet as he wrote, the words fell hollow. Deep down, he knew this wasn't just about defending himself. It was about confronting the man he had become. In a rare moment of introspection, Victor called his wife, Claire. She answered immediately, concern evident in her voice. "Victor, are you okay?" she asked. "I don't know," he admitted, his voice uncharacteristically soft. "I think I've lost sight of everything that mattered." Claire sighed. "You've been so focused on winning, you forgot why you started this in the first place. Maybe it's time to stop fighting and start listening." Her words stayed with him long after the call ended. For years, Victor had equated leadership with control, But Mia had shown him another way, one rooted in collaboration and vision. The realization was humbling and deeply uncomfortable, but it planted a seed of change. The turning point came during a board meeting 2 weeks later. Mia presented her latest initiatives, a phased sustainability plan, measures to improve workplace inclusivity, and a strategy to regain investor trust. The room buzzed with cautious optimism as she spoke, her confidence and clarity commanding respect. At the end of her presentation, the board chair turned to Victor, who had been reinstated in an advisory capacity pending the audit's outcome. "Mr. Steele," he said, "do you have any thoughts?" All eyes turned to Victor, who rose slowly from his seat. For a moment, the room was silent as he gathered his thoughts. When he finally spoke, his tone was measured but sincere. "I spent my career building steel industries into what it is today," he began. "But somewhere along the way, I stopped listening. I let my pride and ambition blind me to what was best for this company. Mia's vision isn't just a departure from the past. It's exactly what we need to secure our future." The room was stunned. Victor's endorsement wasn't just unexpected. It was a monumental shift in the power dynamics of steel industries. For the first time, he acknowledged that his way wasn't the only way. After the meeting, Mia approached Victor in the hallway. "I didn't expect that," she said, her tone cautious but curious. Victor gave her a small, tired smile. "Neither did I, but you've proven me wrong, and I think it's time I start learning from you." Mia nodded, her respect for him deepening despite everything that had transpired. "Thank you," she said simply. As they parted ways, Mia felt a weight lift. Victor's journey wasn't over, but his willingness to step back marked a turning point for both of them. Redemption or defeat wasn't a matter of victory. It was about what they chose to build from the rubble of the past. For the first time, steel industries felt like it had a future worth fighting for. The final board meeting to determine the future of steel industries was set for a crisp Friday morning. The room buzzed with anticipation, tension thick in the air as board members, employees, and legal counsel filed in. At stake was not just the leadership of the company, but its very identity. Would it cling to Victor Steele's old ways or embrace Mia Daniels' bold, transformative vision? Mia arrived early, carrying a leather portfolio filled with data, reports, and her proposals. She wore a deep blue suit that exuded confidence but remained understated, a reminder that her strength lay in her substance, not her appearance. Despite the calm expression on her face, her heart pounded. Today wasn't just another meeting. It was the culmination of months of work, resistance, and personal sacrifices. Victor Steele entered the room moments later, his presence commanding as ever. He had the air of a man who wasn't quite ready to relinquish his grip on power. Though his suspension had weakened his influence, he still had allies on the board, and he planned to use every ounce of his remaining leverage. His gaze met Mia's briefly, and for the first time, there was no trace of mockery, just quiet calculation. The chairperson, a stately man named Gerald Winters, called the meeting to order. "Ladies and gentlemen, today we are here to determine the strategic direction of steel industries and the leadership best suited to carry it forward. This discussion will culminate in a vote. I ask that we all remain professional and focused on what is best for the company." Mia rose first, her posture poised, but not rigid. She clicked a button on her tablet, and the screen behind her lit up with the words, "A future for all. Steel Industries Strategic Vision." "Good morning," she began, her voice steady. "Today, I want to show you how steel industries can not only recover from recent challenges, but emerge stronger and more competitive than ever. This isn't about patching holes or maintaining the status quo. It's about reimagining who we are and what we stand for." She proceeded to outline her plan with precision. Each slide built on the last, weaving a narrative of growth, sustainability, and inclusion. She presented data showing how competitors who adopted similar changes had seen exponential gains in market share. She highlighted testimonials from employees who felt empowered by the new initiatives she had already implemented. And she emphasized the importance of transparency, trust, and long-term vision. "The world is changing," Mia said, looking directly at the board members. "Consumers are demanding accountability. Employees are seeking purpose in their work, and investors are valuing companies that adapt. Steel Industries has the potential to lead this change, but only if we're willing to embrace it. The room was silent as Mia concluded, her words hanging in the air like a challenge. Then it was Victor's turn. He rose slowly, his expression unreadable, and took his place at the head of the room. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, "I won't deny that Steel Industries is at a crossroads, and I commend Ms. Daniels for her passion and effort. But passion alone doesn't run a business." He clicked his own slide, showing a stark graph of profitability over the past 2 decades. This company was built on grit, discipline, and an unyielding focus on results. "My methods may not always be popular, but they have made Steel Industries the powerhouse it is today. Change is necessary, yes, but reckless change is a risk we cannot afford." Victor turned to the board, his voice firm. "I've made mistakes I deeply regret, but I've also spent 2 decades steering this company through every storm it has faced. My record speaks for itself. I ask you to consider what Steel Industries needs: steady hands and experience, not untested ideas." The contrast between Victor's argument and Mia's was stark. Where Mia had focused on the future, Victor clung to the past. Where Mia sought collaboration, Victor promised control. The room seemed to shift as the board members weighed their options. The chairperson opened the floor for questions, and the tension rose. A few board members challenged Mia on the financial risks of her proposals. She responded with calm confidence, citing detailed contingency plans and successful case studies. Others pressed Victor on the ethical breaches uncovered during the audit. His answers were defensive, and though he avoided outright admission of guilt, his evasiveness did not go unnoticed. Finally, Gerald Winters called for closing remarks. Mia spoke first. "Leadership isn't about holding on to power," she said. "It's about empowering others to build something greater than ourselves. Steel Industries has always been about innovation, but innovation isn't just a product, it's a mindset. If we want to thrive, we must be willing to grow. I'm ready to lead us into that future, and I hope you'll join me." Victor's final words were measured but pointed. "I've spent my life protecting this company. I won't let it fall into the hands of unproven ideals. Steel Industries needs a leader who understands its foundation, and I am that leader." With that, the room fell silent. Gerald stood and announced it was time to vote. The results were announced moments later. Mia had won the majority. The room erupted into applause from her supporters, while Victor's allies exchanged uneasy glances. Victor sat quietly as the reality settled over him. When the meeting adjourned, he walked over to Mia, extending his hand. "Congratulations," he said, his tone sincere but subdued. "You've earned this." "Thank you, Victor," Mia replied, shaking his hand. "I hope we can work together to make Steel Industries stronger." Victor gave her a faint smile. "Let's see what the future holds." As Mia left the boardroom, her heart swelled with a mix of relief and determination. She had won the battle, but the real work was just beginning. For the first time, Steel Industries had a leader who was ready to rebuild. Not just for profits, but for people. It was the start of a new era. The months following Mia Daniels' victory marked the beginning of a profound transformation at Steel Industries. The once tense atmosphere that had pervaded the company began to shift, replaced by a growing sense of cautious optimism. Employees, board members, and even skeptical investors were eager to see if Mia could truly deliver on her promises. For Mia, it wasn't just about proving herself. It was about proving what Steel Industries could become under a new kind of leadership. One of Mia's first priorities as CEO was restoring trust within the company. The recent scandal had shaken employees' confidence in their leadership, and Mia knew that transparency was essential. She implemented an open-door policy, inviting employees at all levels to share their concerns and ideas directly with her. It was a stark contrast to Victor Steele's era, where decisions were handed down without explanation or input. At an all-hands meeting shortly after her appointment, Mia addressed the company directly. Standing on the stage in the main conference hall, she spoke with her characteristic calm, yet powerful conviction. "We've been through a lot," she began, her voice steady as she scanned the room. "I know trust has been broken between leadership and employees, between the company and its stakeholders. But trust can be rebuilt, and it starts with honesty. I won't promise that the road ahead will be easy, but I will promise this. You'll always know where we stand, and you'll always have a voice in shaping our future. Her words resonated deeply. For the first time, employees felt like they were part of something bigger, not just cogs in a corporate machine. The sense of unity that began to form became the foundation of the company's cultural renewal. Mia wasted no time putting her vision into action. The sustainability initiatives she had proposed during the board meetings were rolled out in phases, starting with a pilot program in one of Steel Industries' manufacturing plants. Solar panels were installed, water usage was reduced, and energy-efficient machinery replaced older models. Within months, the plant reported a 20% reduction in operational costs, silencing critics who had labeled the initiatives too risky. At the same time, Mia launched a company-wide inclusivity program. Departments were encouraged to diversify their hiring practices, and leadership training focused on recognizing and eliminating unconscious bias. Mia also created an employee advisory council that included voices from all levels of the company, ensuring that decisions reflected the needs of everyone, not just the top executives. One of her proudest moments came when Steel Industries was recognized by a prominent industry group for its commitment to ethical practices and innovation. "This is just the beginning," she told her team during a celebratory event. "We've proven that doing the right thing isn't just good for the soul, it's good for business." While Mia moved forward with her initiatives, Victor Steele faced the challenge of redefining his place within the company. The audit had cleared him of criminal charges but confirmed lapses and oversight that tarnished his reputation. For weeks after the board's decision, Victor avoided the spotlight, grappling with the loss of power that had defined his identity for decades. It was Claire, his wife, who ultimately helped him see the bigger picture. "You built this company, Victor," she reminded him one evening. "But legacies aren't just about what you start, they're about what you leave behind. Maybe it's time to help Steel Industries become something even greater than you imagined." Victor returned to Steel Industries in an advisory role, focusing on mentoring younger executives and sharing the lessons of his career, both successes and mistakes. It was a humbling adjustment, but over time, he found fulfillment in supporting the company's new direction. Though he and Mia would never fully agree on everything, there was mutual respect between them, born of shared ambition and hard-won battles. For Mia, success wasn't just about implementing policies or increasing profits. It was about seeing the impact of her leadership in the people around her. One day, while walking through the office, she overheard a group of junior employees discussing a project. "She actually listens," one of them said, his tone filled with awe. "I've never worked somewhere where leadership cared about what we thought." The words struck a chord with Mia. In that moment, she realized that the changes she was implementing were more than strategic. They were personal. She wasn't just changing a company. She was creating a workplace where people felt valued and inspired. A year after Mia's appointment, Steel Industries hosted its first annual Future Forward Summit, an event celebrating innovation, diversity, and sustainability. The keynote address was delivered by Mia herself, who reflected on the company's journey over the past year. "We've come a long way," she said, her voice filled with pride. "But this isn't just about where we've been, it's about where we're going." Steel Industries is proof that when we combine vision with action, we can achieve the extraordinary. The audience erupted into applause, a mix of employees, investors, and industry leaders who had witnessed the transformation firsthand. As the event concluded and the attendees filtered out, Mia stood alone on the stage, looking out at the now empty seats. The weight of the past year settled over her, not as a burden, but as a reminder of what was possible. She thought of James Bradford, whose belief in her had set all of this in motion, and felt a quiet sense of gratitude. Victor approached her from the side of the stage, his expression thoughtful. "You've done well, Mia," he said. "Better than I ever expected." "Thank you, Victor," she replied. "I couldn't have done it without the foundation you built." Victor nodded, a faint smile on his face. "Make sure you keep building it right." As he walked away, Mia turned back to the stage, her vision clear. Steel Industries wasn't just a company. It was a symbol of resilience, change, and the power of leadership that lifted others. And under her guidance, It was ready to soar into a brighter, better future. The new era had begun, and for the first time in its history, steel industries truly belonged to everyone.